And a very good Monday afternoon to you from the University of Arizona after a lengthy trip. 2 games in 48 hours for the Wildcats. They are moving on. They are off to the Sweet 16. Arizona with the premier matchup lined up against the Arkansas Razorbacks. And what a weekend it was in San Diego at Viejas Arena for Arizona. They get through Long Island University, a 34-point victory, and then a 12-point victory last night against Utah State. We had analysis, Arizona student media, very complete, thorough analysis from the venue. I also am working on a longer form article contrasting the play styles of Rick Pitino and Tommy Lloyd. That should be out in the coming hour, so certainly something you'll want to check out on both Camp Student Radio and the Daily Wildcat. But I want to really emphasize that there's a real opportunity here for Arizona this year. And a lot of times, look, you have a top seed, only one team can win, Florida already going home. It can be easy to think, well, there's a lot of really good teams and it's a crapshoot, and perhaps this won't be the team that wins the championship. And the other inclination of Arizona fans, the other tendency is, hey, we haven't been delivering as a top seed, right? The university has had expectations. They've had hopes in years past and just have come up a little bit short. Tommy Lloyd now has been to the Sweet 16 in four of his 5 seasons with the program. That's really impressive, but they haven't gotten past the Sweet 16. If his team is able to win on Thursday, it'll be Arizona's first time going to the Elite Eight under Tommy Lloyd. So that would certainly be an impressive feat and something he hasn't done yet. And I really do believe that that's where we're heading, and if not further, because I think this is an Arizona team worth believing in. Yes, Tommy has had 1 seeds, he's had 2 seeds, but he's had those early exits, he's had those Sweet 16 departures, and I'll get into why I think this team is different, and we saw a lot of it this weekend, but I really think the sample size and the important data is not the 2 games that we just saw, but really what your eyes have told you all season long. This is a diverse, very well-rounded team that is able to win a multitude of ways. That's something I've been leaning on all year. I don't think this is a one-dimensional Arizona team, and when you're able to go through different avenues, I think that those are the teams that are rewarded in March. You've got to win 6 consecutive games. Arizona's won 2. They've got 4 left to go, and those one-dimensional teams, those teams who really rely on the three-pointer especially, they can get tripped up when you have to win 6 consecutive games, and I don't think that's going to be what ties up this Arizona team. What we saw the first 2 games was the distinct advantage Arizona does have, and if they do have an identity, it's their size. They out-rebounded LIU and Utah State mercilessly. We saw deficits of over 20-plus rebound margins in each contest. Arizona with tremendous presence at the rim. Domination, really, in the paint, offensively, defensively, and on the boards. Moteas Krivas, 14 rebounds yesterday's game. The 78-66 victory. Krivas with 14 boards. And it's not just Krivas, right? They've got tremendous size and physicality coming from Koa Pete, coming from Ivan Karchenkov, and coming from Tobe Awaka. It's a team that has several players that, if they were on another team, may be the top or second best rebounder on that team. Arizona's got 4 guys that I would say on any other team would be a top 2 rebounder on those squads. And what does it do? It creates so many second chance opportunities for an Arizona team that doesn't shoot the 3 particularly well. But when you're a weak shooting 3, when you're a team that doesn't shoot the 3 as well as others, but you've got that confidence, you've got that ability to collect offensive rebounds, it almost doesn't matter as much because those are they're almost like free chances, right? I mean, what is the risk of missing a 3-pointer if you've got such a great chance of collecting the offensive rebound? And that's what we've seen from Arizona's basketball team in the first 2 games. You think about a 21 rebound margin against LIU, and it was more of the same last night against Utah State at Viejas Arena. Arizona out-rebounds on a 2-to-1 ratio. A 2-to-1 ratio, they out-rebounded Utah State 54-26. How about those offensive rebounds for the Wildcats? 22-8. Exactly what I was just describing. Yeah, Arizona, they missed 10 3-pointers. They were 7 of 17, which is really quite good for Arizona, a team that doesn't shoot the 3 well, 41%. And of those 10 misses, it felt like almost half of them yielded offensive rebounds. So they're basically free, low-risk looks at three-point tries. The negative for Arizona, the cause for concern, was the turnover margin. And it's such a cliche in basketball, and something that so many experts, so many panelists point to is you've got to win the turnover battle. You've got to win the turnover battle. Arizona lost the turnover battle badly, and that's the reason the game was as close as it was. Later in the second half, just a 4-point game. 11 turnovers for Arizona, 4 turnovers for Utah State. I give the Aggies a lot of credit. I thought they played intense, high-effort defense. I thought that they were in Arizona's face. And like I said, they forced those turnovers. Full court pressure in the second half was really effective for Utah State. And Arizona didn't have necessarily the right answers at the most important moments. Their offense did enough to overcome those struggles in the second half. Defensively, the Cats were really, really strong. And a lot of the points for Utah State, they came in the paint and they came off turnovers. If you count both points in the paint and points off turnovers, that's more than 50% of Utah State's points last night. Right, 34 combined points, whether it's in the paint or off turnovers, of Utah State's 66. So that was certainly a key aspect of the game. But when the Aggies had to get into their offensive structure, if Arizona forced them to outside shots, they were contested. They were well defended. Utah State was 25 of 64 from the field. That's 39%. These numbers don't happen in a vacuum, right? I mean, if a team's going to shoot in an open gym, I can tell you they're going to make a heck of a lot more than 39% of their shots. So that is very much a result of Arizona forcing Utah State into taking inopportune shots, challenging Utah State's offense, and yielding that 39% field goal percentage. That's not luck. That's not the way the ball rolls. That's really well-played defense by an Arizona team that's been strong defensively pretty much all season long. So it's a good win for Arizona. Utah State, not a bad team. They beat Villanova by 10 in a game where they shot the ball really poorly and turned the ball over quite a bit. Beat Villanova by 10 points, and Arizona gets a 12-point victory over Utah State. It's going to set up a really intriguing matchup with Arkansas. That's Thursday in San Jose, 6:45 Pacific and Arizona time, now the same time zone post-daylight savings. So that's the matchup. Arkansas, one of the top teams in the SEC. And if you're thinking about the SEC, right, the top dog the last 2 years, the favorite, the number 1 seed, the Florida Gators, they're gone. Iowa beats them in the second round. You think about Vanderbilt, who lost to Nebraska. That was another team that made a run in the SEC tournament. You've got Tennessee, who did advance. But is there an SEC team right now with a better chance of contending than the Arkansas Razorbacks? I mean, it's a really compelling question. Certainly Alabama played very well. They had a dominating victory yesterday, and they have a matchup set with Michigan. But those top SEC teams, whether it is Alabama or whether it's Arkansas, they've got to play arguably the 2 best teams in the tournament in Arizona and Michigan. So I think an interesting question is which of those 2 has a better chance to win, right? Is it going to be Alabama representing the SEC or Arkansas? Do either one of them have a chance to beat a number 1 seed and to move on to the Elite 8? Now, the one we're going to see first chronologically is going to be Arkansas and Arizona. The Cats opened as a 9.5-point favorite. That is a Zofting number, very large. This is a good Arkansas team. Now, Arizona, I've been singing their praises the first 10 minutes of the show, and I think rightfully so. I think this is an Arizona team capable of winning the championship, one that demands your respect. But having said that, 9.5-point favorite against Arkansas, that is a really remarkable number. Now, the Razorbacks, 28-8 on the season. Arizona is 34-2. I think this is going to be a great test for Arizona. I really do. John Calipari, he's got one of the better teams I think he's had in recent memory. It's been a few years. Those last couple in Kentucky maybe didn't necessarily go the way we expected, not what we're used to seeing from Coach Cal. And it's been a little bit of a slow start in Arkansas. Of course, they did have a major victory last year in the tournament against St. John's, but it seems like this is the year where Cal's got a team that is starting to resemble, the kind of team that we have grown accustomed to seeing from John Calipari. And he's got a Cuff Jr., 23.3 points per game, right? That's 35 games played this year, 23.3 points per game. One of the better guards I think Calipari has ever had, which is really quite a statement when you consider the talent, the NBA talent that John Calipari has coached. And I'm saying a Cuff Jr., I think he may be one of the better guards Coach Cal has had. How will he do against this stout Arizona defense? That is going to be a real matchup to keep an eye on. As for Arizona's guard play, can't say enough about Braden Burries and Jaden Bradley. The two of them, first of all, they complement each other's games so well. I mean, it's hard to find a guard tandem that is where the roles are defined as clearly as they are. Jaden Bradley is a true facilitator. He's a true point guard. He is not looking to score first. He is setting up his teammates. He's the stable rock for this team, and that's exactly what you want from a senior. And then Braden Burries, yeah, he plays a lot more mature than a freshman, but he is a freshman, and he's lacking a little bit of scar tissue, and he shoots fearlessly, and he attacks the basket. And I think the two of them together, they really complement each other like a great dish. I mean, if you're meshing, flavors that work together really well, this isn't like you're mixing peanut butter and chicken, right? This is peanut butter and jelly. And sometimes you have two great guards, and the mixture just doesn't necessarily work, right? You've got dominating personalities you think about, and we'll see how it goes with, let's say, James Harden and with Donovan Mitchell. An even more clear example is Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic, right? Luka Doncic and Jalen Brunson, they're great team leaders on their own. The Lakers, one of the best teams in the West right now. The Knicks, one of the best teams in the East. But together, we saw that in Dallas, and I don't think either one of them was reaching their full potential. However, in Arizona, Jaden Bradley, Braden Burries, they complement each other perfectly. Like I said, it's not peanut butter and chicken, it's peanut butter and jelly. The two of them are the perfect combination, and I think it's a backcourt that is really underrated in college basketball. People like to point to the size that Arizona has, and they should, because they've out-rebounded their opponents by a combined 49 in 2 games. 49! That's the rebound margin for Arizona in 2 games. Take a step back and actually listen to that number. One more time. 49, 28, and 21. That's the rebound margin in 2 games for the Wildcats. And I'm telling you right now, give the bigs a lot of credit. Give a lot of credit to the front court. The back court is just as good. Jaden Bradley and Braden Burries, the two of them really play off each other well. So that is certainly something that will be a storyline in the game against Arkansas. Now, I do want to highlight Bradley more because of the way he played against Utah State. 18 points, 5 of 7 from the free throw line. But for Bradley to get to the line 7 times, that's a winning formula for the Cats. They need him to be an aggressive facilitator. You can be a passive facilitator, which he can be at times, but I think the best facilitators, they're looking to dish, but they're also looking to drive and looking to create and take matters into their hands just a little bit. He's a team player, but he's got to press the issue enough so that teams go after him, and it leaves openings throughout the court. So I like Bradley getting to the line 7 times. He had 18 points, and he also, the assists weren't necessarily there, but he was leading the team from in front. There was no question who the team's leader was yesterday on the floor. It was Jaden Bradley. And Braden Burries, does he ever have a bad game? I mean, it really doesn't seem like it. 3 for 3 from beyond the arc yesterday. Perfect 100%. 5 of 7 from the field, a 16-point game for him. Braden Burries, another impressive performance. The two of them combined for 34 points. Now down low, Koa Pete and Krivas, boy, did they have a great presence. 25 points between the two. They combined for 24 rebounds. Now, that's the part of the team that I think most people are going to point to immediately and say that's their identity, and you're not wrong to say that. You're not wrong to say that. 25 points between the two of them, 24 rebounds. Fair statement. That's their identity, but don't sleep on the backcourt. Burries and Bradley, the two of them play off each other very well. It's going to make for a compelling run for Arizona, and I think it's going to be a tough path. Find me a team with a more difficult path than Arizona. Now, I think they're up to the task. I think this is a very strong Arizona team. But find me a team with a tougher path right now than the Wildcats. Everyone they were supposed to face is still alive. That's not true in most other regions. Arkansas is there. They're waiting for Arizona in San Jose. That matchup on Thursday. And it looks like Purdue is going to be there in the Elite Eight. Now, Sean Miller, the former Arizona coach, a great story with Texas. They win their play-in game, a close game. They win that against NC State. Don't let them get hot, right? Kind of like the Red Sox in 2004. Don't let them win one because they won their round 1 matchup against BYU. They win their round 2 game against Gonzaga. They've beat some good teams. Texas has beaten some good teams we were talking about all the way back in November in BYU and in Gonzaga. That's the resume right now for Sean Miller and the Texas Longhorns. And they're playing Purdue the game before Arizona and Arkansas in San Jose. So no matter who wins, it's going to be a tough battle for the Cats in the Elite Eight should they beat Arkansas. But the money is certainly on Purdue to win that matchup. And by the way, not easy to find more preseason favorites than Purdue. They were one of the most popular picks, if not the most popular pick, to win the championship this year. And the Boilermakers, they're healthy. This is the team they were supposed to be in November, and they're playing well. So if it is Purdue and Arizona in the Elite Eight, certainly that's the way things are trending. Purdue a 6.5-point favorite, Arizona a 7.5-point favorite. If it's those two, it's a tough matchup for the Cats. I'm telling you, Arkansas and Purdue, possibly in a weekend, they got their hands full. And then you're talking about both one seeds that Arizona could play still alive. It would be Michigan possibly in the Final Four should they win. And, of course, Duke, the favorite to meet Arizona in the final. That is some run. It's not going to be easy for Arizona. It starts on Thursday. A tough matchup with the Razorbacks. But find me a team with a tougher run to the Final Four than Arizona. That's a one seed, I'll say. Right? Find me that team. Arkansas and Purdue. All right, let's talk about Michigan. Alabama, an impressive victory over Texas Tech, okay? It's an impressive victory. And then it's going to be Iowa State, possibly, in the Elite Eight for Michigan. It's not an easy run. That's probably as close as it gets. But Arizona's beaten Iowa State twice this season, so they may have a little bit of confidence there should that have been their draw. It's not. Instead, it's a Purdue team that they don't have that familiarity with. They don't have that confidence with. So will that make for a tougher matchup for Arizona? We'll have to see. I mean, I think it's a very interesting conversation. Would you rather go up against a team you beat twice? A little bit of pressure there. Tough to beat a good team twice. Tough to beat a good team 3 times in a row. But they would have that confidence. Instead, it's a Purdue team that is going to be foreign to Arizona. Now, how much scouting has Arizona done on Purdue, if any? That's an interesting question. Are they overlooking Arkansas? And not even overlooking, but are they at least making background considerations to the Boilermakers and a potential Elite Eight matchup? That's an interesting theme. I don't know the answer to that. But it's going to be a tough run for Arizona to get to the Final Four. Like I said, those are two matchups that I think are going to really test the Arizona Wildcats. Like I said, probably the closest you can do to find a team with a tougher path would be Iowa State and Alabama. That's the two teams in the way of Michigan. But for Duke, look, St. John's played great. It was a great game. I was in the building for it. It was on right before Arizona yesterday, St. John's in Kansas. But St. John's, they are offensively limited a little bit. They didn't shoot the ball well. They could have played better against Kansas, let the Jayhawks back in the game after leading by double digits in the second half. But I think Duke is the better team there. And if they're able to get through St. John's, you're looking at either Michigan State or UConn. Two very good teams. But I have to think Purdue is better than either one of Michigan State or UConn. Michigan State, I do think, is a strong team coached by Tom Izzo. Always going to have your hands full. And certainly if it is St. John's that's able to get by Duke, can you imagine the kind of defensive struggle between St. John's and Rick Pitino going up against Tom Izzo and Michigan State? I mean, where do we set the over-under for that game? Maybe about 102? Final score 52-49. I mean, what are the expectations for that matchup? You know there's going to be a lot of defense, a lot of intensity. Is there going to be a lot of offense? Now, we'll see if that actually is the way the bracket shakes out. It's certainly possible. St. John's a 6.5-point favorite on the 27th. Michigan State getting a couple of points, but certainly those two have a chance. And should they meet in the Elite Eight, you better believe offense might be, the underdog in that matchup. But that is a possibility. But I really do believe Arizona with a very tough draw in the bracket, but it's going to make for even more compelling and entertaining basketball and maybe an advantage for the Cats if they get through. Will any team have been as battle-tested as Arizona by the time they get to the Final Four, by the time they get to Indianapolis? And should they dethrone kind of what would be the hometown favorite in Indy, in Purdue, then you kind of feel like you slayed the home team, so to speak, and you go in to Indy with kind of that confidence like, oh, this is our house now. We beat the owner. We knocked out the owner of this house. That makes this my house. And perhaps that will be true for the Arizona Wildcats. We're going to take a quick break. We'll have more to say on March Madness, on what we saw this weekend in San Diego when we return on the Rundown on Camp Student Radio, 1570 AM. Welcome back to the Rundown on Camp Student Radio 1570 AM. We just talked about the matchup, Arizona and Arkansas. That's your Sweet 16 game. But what's been going on throughout March Madness? What have been some interesting storylines that have caught my eye in the first two rounds? Well, certainly, I got to say I was wrong on this one. Florida, I thought they were a hot team, playing as good as anybody entering the tournament, peaking at the right time, and championship tested, right? Coaching staff has the experience winning the title last year. There's players on the roster that had been there and done it. And like I said, they were playing really well entering March. So to me, the Gators checked about as many boxes as any one team could, but sports, it's just not that simple, right? It's never that simple. It's never that easy. There's not low-hanging fruit like that. And, of course, the Gators eliminated yesterday in the second round by Iowa, a team that many, including myself, had losing in the first round. So that's the way it can go. Another team I think you got to keep an eye on, though, is Michigan State. And they've got a really compelling game in Washington, D.C. against UConn. And if you're not excited for the D.C. region, then I've got to question how much of a sports fan you really are, right? You've got Tom Izzo, one of the better college coaches of my generation, of the previous generation, right? As good as it gets, going up against Dan Hurley and UConn, the winners of 2 of the last 3 championships. That's your matchup. And the winner of that game will face the winner of Duke and St. John's. And, of course, Rick Pitino has nightmares about what Duke has done to him. Of course, the Christian Laettner shot. Pitino on the wrong side of that. And so St. John's, after a thrilling victory against Kansas, they will play Duke, with the winner going to play the winner of Michigan State and UConn. And we saw a front row seat, right? Beautiful view of St. John's victory against the Blue Devils against the Jayhawks. And I think the Blue Devils are going to have their hands full, right? Zuby Ejiofor, I mean, he's a really physical, big player, very diverse game. He can shoot, he can get to the basket, he can rebound. I mean, he can certainly defend. Rick Pitino doesn't have anybody out there that can't defend. And that makes them a really tough out. There's not one player on the floor for St. John's that can't play defensively. Now, they didn't shoot the ball well against Kansas, and they're going to need to shoot the ball better if they're going to beat Duke. But the Blue Devils, look, let's be honest, they have not been indefatigable, right? They have shown weakness. They have shown glimmers of struggle. So it is interesting, right? Are the Blue Devils a little bit vulnerable? And is St. John's the right kind of team? Do they have the right complexion to really challenge Duke and potentially upset them and send them home? I think it's a fair question, because when you've got a team that's maybe lacking a little bit of confidence, that nearly lost to Siena. That's right. They nearly lost to the Siena College Saints. Then perhaps a defensive, in-your-face kind of team in St. John's could be the last thing that Duke wants to see on the adjacent sideline. Could be the last thing they want to see. And it's going to make for a really compelling game. I think this weekend we're really going to be spoiled. And a lot of times, look, find me a better weekend in sports than the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8. Find me a better weekend. You're talking about Thursday through Sunday, nonstop gems, right? And if you get the right weekend, it can be special. You've got Sean Miller, an 11 seed, Texas, going up against Purdue. You've got 2 underdogs from the Midwest, a major rivalry between Iowa and Nebraska. 2 teams that have historic football programs that don't have the basketball kind of brand, right? They're facing off against each other. Arkansas, Arizona, John Calipari against Tommy Lloyd. And then 2 teams that are also favorites. I mean, let's be honest, one of the better teams from the Big Ten, Illinois, against Houston. Houston was in the championship last year. That's a team not a lot of people are talking about. Houston was 1 play away from winning the championship. Very steady this year in the Big 12. Very steady. Never really too high or too low this year for the Houston Cougars. And that's a team that people are just a little bit shy about discussing. They've got a big game against Illinois. It's going to be a tough test, right? The Illinois, it's been a really strong season. I think the 2 of them are about as close to a mirror image as you can get. They're each very steady, very consistent, and, there's only room for one of them. I think it's going to make a great nightcap on Thursday. It's going to be an exciting day of basketball on Thursday. Tough to find a weak game. Now, the weakest is Iowa and Nebraska, but the fun aspect of that matchup is neither one of these teams we're used to seeing in the discussion, in the tournament, on at least the second weekend of the tournament, right? Maybe we see them in the first round, but do we expect to see Iowa and Nebraska, in the Sweet 16? And the answer is no, we do not. No, we do not. And they're playing each other on Thursday. So if that's your dog, if that's your weak part of the ticket, it's not bad. And Friday, as good as Thursday is, Friday is stronger. I hate to say it. Friday is stronger. And I'll be in San Jose on Thursday. I'll be watching on TV on Friday. Friday is the better day. You got St. John's and Duke in the nation's capital. Alabama and Michigan, they're playing in Chicago in the United Center. Alabama and Michigan. What a game that's going to be. The Crimson Tide dominated Texas Tech. I mean, they took their lunch money, they stole their lunch money, and then they pushed Texas Tech to the ground and stomped right on their nose. That's the visual. And then right when the blood was gushing, it was gushing out of Texas Tech's nose, they gave another kick to the chin. I mean, it just never ended. It was a beatdown from start to finish. A 30-plus point victory for Alabama against a good Texas Tech team. Yes, Texas Tech was without J.T. Toppin. A lot of people quick to point that out. And I ask you this. Texas Tech was one of the better teams in college basketball before the injury to Toppin. Now, does a really good basketball team become that much weaker after one injury? I would say they don't. I mean, look at the Boston Celtics, right? The Celtics right now are the number 2 seed in the Eastern Conference. Number 2 seed. Jason Tatum has not played up until last week. Hadn't played. Number 2 seed. And frankly, the Celtics have gotten worse since he returned, but that's a story for another day. Celtics, the number 2 seed without Jason Tatum. Now, JT Toppin out for Texas Tech. Still no pushover. And they won easily against Akron in the first round. Alabama beats them by 30-plus. And Alabama was the underdog in that game, according to Vegas. The underdog. Alabama and Michigan, that's your second game. Michigan, you want to talk about steady all season long? In every game, dominating at times? That's the Michigan Wolverines. That is going to be a really compelling game. Right now, the largest favorite of the week is Michigan against Alabama. You sure about that? Are you sure about that? 10.5 point favorite the Wolverines are. I don't know. Seems like a lot. Maybe the best game of the weekend? UConn, Michigan State. We already talked about it. It's Hurley, it's Izzo. It's 2 historic teams right now, 2 of the Blue Bloods in college basketball. That's the other one in Washington, D.C. Now, to be in D.C. right now, get away from what's going on in Capitol Hill. Stay far away from Capitol Hill. Make your way over to the basketball arena, to Capital One Arena. Don't watch the Wizards. You don't want to do that. You do not want to stumble into a Wizards game. But if you can find your way to St. John's and Duke, Michigan State, UConn on Friday, March 27th, you're doing something right. Right now, the get-in price, $476. $476. It's college basketball. $476. That's to get in the building. You're up in the nosebleeds at the very top. You're at the very top. You can't make out a number from up there. $476. If you want to be able to read somebody's jersey number, you're looking at 4 figures. And I can understand it. St. John's, Duke, Michigan State, UConn. That's what's going on in the nation's capital. Again, you don't want to go anywhere near the White House. You don't want to go anywhere near the Capitol building. The Supreme Court might want to stay away too. Capital One Arena, you can have some fun. Great basketball being played there on Friday and also on Sunday. And the nightcap on Friday, it's Tennessee and Iowa State in the United Center again. Tennessee, really exciting game over Virginia. Virginia, if it's not Duke in the ACC this year, it's Virginia. Second best team in the ACC. Now, do we want to call it the Atlantic Coast Conference? Probably we don't, because you've got Stanford, you've got Cal Berkeley playing in the ACC. So we'll just call it the ACC. And Virginia, right there this year. Now, tough to be right there because Duke had such a comfortable lead. But a good season for Virginia, and Tennessee beat them yesterday in what was a very entertaining game. Came down to the last play. And the Volunteers moved on. And they're going to face an Iowa State team that Arizona fans are very familiar with. This is another aggressive, in-your-face kind of team, Iowa State. And they're going to take it to Tennessee. I think probably my favorite pick of the week, if I had to give one out, would be the Cyclones. They're laying 4.5 against the Vols. Now, it's a nice win for Tennessee against Virginia, but I don't think they're one of the top dogs necessarily coming out of the SEC, and I don't love their chances against Iowa State here in the Sweet 16. I think it's a good draw for the Cyclones, and I think they may be able to cover that number right now, 4.5 points in Chicago. That's the way I see it here. Now, here's a great question. You've got 3 SEC teams right now. 3, that's it. Or excuse me, 4. I'm not used to Texas being in the SEC. You got 4 SEC teams. Now, Arkansas is getting 7.5. Texas is getting 6.5. Alabama's getting 10.5. And Tennessee's getting 4.5. Will there be an SEC team in the Elite 8? 4 underdogs out of the 16 teams left. You got 4 dogs. Are any of them making it to the Elite 8? And if so, who? Now, I just told you my pick of the week is Iowa State 4.5. I also am telling you this. Alabama getting 10.5 from Michigan feels like a lot. Feels like a lot. And then that leaves Arkansas and Texas. That's what it leaves. Texas might be the team with the most confidence in the tournament right now. 11 seed against Purdue. And I'm telling you right now, Purdue, do not sleep on Purdue. A lot of returning players, a very similar team to the one we saw last year in the tournament. Maybe not 100% focused throughout the season, but why would they be? They know March is when it counts. Well, we're in March. We are in March. It counts now. And I think you could have a very motivated Purdue team. But Texas, like I said, as confident as anybody in March Madness right now. It's a very interesting start to the week on Thursday at 4:10 Pacific in San Jose. A very good start. Does Texas have the best chance against that Purdue team that I just said that's very experienced to move on and represent the SEC in the Elite 8? Now, I got to be honest with you. If I had to make a prediction, I would say the SEC will not have any representatives in the Elite 8. I don't think any of these teams are going to pull off the victory. I think 10.5 is a lot for Alabama, but the experience of Purdue, and I think they are starting to play their best basketball at the right time. The experience of Purdue, be shocked if they lost to Texas. I would be. I'm sorry to say it. Be very surprised. And you want to talk about elevating your play when it counts? Michigan, as steady as they've been this year, they lost to Purdue in the Big Ten championship game. Don't forget about that for 1 second. Purdue beats Michigan, who some have as their pick to win the championship. Purdue beat them in the Big Ten championship game. That is a very impressive resume piece. You slam it down your resume on my desk. Hey, I beat Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. You've got my attention for sure. You've got it. I'm thinking about giving you the job right there. You don't even have to say anything. Beat Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. You've got my attention. So do I really think Texas, an 11 seed, who's very confident, do I really think they're going to beat Purdue? No, I do not. I don't. And then it comes down to Arizona and Arkansas. Arkansas becomes your last hope for the SEC to have a team in the Elite 8. And I think this is a very well-rounded Arizona team. I think Arkansas, they've got the one-star guard averaging 23 points a game. Is that going to be enough to get over the top for Arkansas? We've seen these teams with one stars make their way into the McHale Center, make their way against the Cats, and usually it's a team effort for Arizona, and the sole effort comes up a little bit short, whether it was DeBonsa and BYU, Darren Peterson and Kansas. Now, Kansas did beat Arizona, but Peterson didn't play. The game he did play, it was a emphatic victory for Arizona. Emphatic. I don't think the SEC is going to have a team in the Elite 8. I really don't. And then the strength, the conference that may really be shining this weekend could be the Big 12. If Arizona is able to get by Arkansas, Houston's got a good chance against Illinois. They're a 3.5-point favorite. I just gave you Iowa State as my pick of the week, 4.5. They could easily have 3 teams there in the Elite 8. They could have 3 teams. Now, the SEC has more right now, 4-3, but 4 underdogs against 3 favorites in the Big 12. 4-3. ACC's down to 1. They've got just Duke. And the rest, really, the Big Ten is strong. The Big Ten is unquestionably strong. You got Michigan, you got Michigan State, and Purdue. Right? And then, of course, you've got Iowa and Nebraska. Iowa, Nebraska, nobody's giving either one a chance. And I think it'll be a fun story that one of them is going to be in the Elite 8. But is anybody afraid of Iowa and Nebraska? Does anyone think that ultimately they're going to be able to get to the Final Four? I think the answer is no. I think the answer is going to be no. And they're going to be playing the winner of Duke and St. John's, I believe, eventually, as they make their way through. At first, it'll be the winner of Iowa, Nebraska, Illinois, and Houston, and probably Duke coming from the very top of the bracket in the Final Four. But you have to think Illinois and Houston, one of those two teams, is going to be leaving the South region. Now, here's an interesting thing. The South region is being played in Houston, Texas. And the University of Houston is kind of headlining that region. So will they have a distinct advantage? You have to think they will in the Elite Eight and in the Sweet 16. Will it be Houston moving on to the Final Four for the second consecutive year? You have to think they got a great chance. So it'd be curious to see which conference really can stick their chest out on Sunday with the most representatives in the Elite Eight and going to the Final Four. I think the Big 12 is very well positioned. The Big 10 is too, no question about it. The Big 10 is too, and if it is Arizona and Purdue, that could be a pivotal matchup if you're talking about conference representation going to Indianapolis. Well, we hope you enjoyed the show. Just me today, summarizing what was a very exciting start to March Madness. It's only going to get better from here. And like I said, find me a better weekend in sports than the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight at the very end of March. It's really challenging to do. Okay, it's very challenging to do. The Masters, I think, would be your closest competition, and that's only 2.5 weeks away. So it's exciting times. We love late winter, early spring here in the U.S. for sports, and certainly a pleasure to bring it to you today on Camp Student Radio on 1570 AM. A reminder, miss part of the show, no big deal. It's not a big deal. Go back and listen to the show in its entirety on YouTube. Just simply type in the Rundown Camp. That's the Rundown Camp with a K on YouTube to watch the show in its entirety if you missed a moment. We'll be back next Monday, same time. We hope to see you here.